Good morning and happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy early morning for anybody who's on the East Coast, in the Midwest, on the West Coast, and for those who are coming to us live outside of the US in Europe, like Dorothy Dalton that I have here today. It's in the latter part of the afternoon, and we're gonna make this blast and a half really blast full so Dorothy can get out for her afternoon walk in the sunshine. And so, Dorothy, we're here today to talk about this thing called unconscious bias and bias blind spots. But before we dive in, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm based in Brussels, and exceptionally, we have some sun today, so that's why I'm planning a walk. Um, my background is in corporate HR. I now run an HR consulting and executive search organization. I'm a coach and trainer, and I work currently mainly with clients who want to make their hiring systems and their HR systems more diverse, inclusive, and gender balanced. So I work internationally, and I'm pretty much focused on particularly the hiring process. And I'm obviously involved with job seekers as well.
Fantastic. So, is the interest in driving more diverse culture? I mean, has that steadily, what's been happening? Has it been increasing? It seems like it is the watchword or one of many key watchwords. Is that a new thing, or just people getting more conscientious about understanding where conscious and unconscious bias happens in the workplace?
Well, I think there is an increased interest, and I think a lot of organizations, truthfully, are being a little bit shamed into doing this. But I think what we're seeing is a lot of organizations are not walking the talk. So
Mm.
they're not giving their people the budgets to make the change. They're not making the systemic changes that they need to. But it is slowly changing, and we are chipping away. But it's sometimes can be challenging.
Exactly. So before we get into any other, areas of this, let's put some context around what unconscious bias is so that we're all working on the same playing field, at least for this blast.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to start off with this was really to not to demonize it, because it's over the years it's become something that is a very sensitive subject. But in very simple words, if you have a brain, you have a bias. So basically, we all have biases, and in simple terms, it's a storing system for data. So it allows us to store, retrieve, to help us make fast decisions, particularly when we're under pressure and duress. And it obviously comes from the times when we lived in caves or in the forest or on the prairie. Those days are gone. And so it has less use in a 21st century knowledge economy. So if I was going to put it in terms of the digital era, it's like a hashtag. That's a really short way of looking at it.
So, newsflash, we all have one if you have a brain, right? So I love the way that you said, let's not demonize it. And, in terms of normalizing it, I know that there are pretty much at least some guidelines to understanding what it is. Can you top line what those 5 ways are to quickly understand our unconscious bias?
Well, I'm not sure whether there might actually be more than 5 ways, but they're interlinked. I think the first thing is that they say inclusion starts with I. So the first person you have to work on is yourself. I sent you a link beforehand. I would recommend that everyone does the Harvard implicit bias test. That can be a real eye opener. I actually, when I did it, I exhibit gender bias. So I was astonished because it was just the way I was raised. So we have to know ourselves. We have to we have to know the biases. We have to understand when we see it and hear it with others, and we have to understand it when we hear it and see it with ourselves. So it's just basically growing awareness around the topic. The other thing, and this is relates to your blind spot question, is we have to understand our triggers, because very often we can find ourselves triggered by something and we don't know why it is. And most people think that they're less biased than everybody else. So, and the reality is sometimes that can be misleading. We all have biases.
Mm-hmm. So, good morning, Kevin D. Turner. And I know we love Kevin, right? And he says, I love that if you have a brain, you have a bias, and it's so good to recognize this part of nature. How do we understand and rewire? Great question, Kevin. Do you want to start breaking that down for us, Dorothy?
I'm not sure you can rewire it. I think you can only interrupt it, like pull the plug out. So I think I mean, they even call that in the process of bias interrupters. So quite often when you feel triggered, you have the opportunity to manage your response. And they say it's about 6 seconds. So you take that time to monitor your reactions, and you'll start to learn to recognize them. So I'll give you for instance, worked with a client who was asked an illegal question, or what she thought was an illegal question in an interview around her childcare arrangements. And her instinct, right, was to say, why are you asking me a legal question? No, that's wrong. You're discriminating against me. But what she did was she asked a question. So she did what we call go from defensive to discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so she just said, can you clarify why you're asking me that? And it transpired that the organization had an arrangement with the nursery down the road, where they had, super discount on the nursery fees. So she stopped herself blasting away in defense mode and just went into challenging the assumption and just asking a question.
I love that. Go from I'm just having that defense mode, right? Defend, like immediately jumping to that knee-jerk reaction, pausing, discovery.
And the reason for that is that unconscious bias in primal times was a way of identifying difference and therefore danger. So I think we feel defensive quite often when it happens, and we go a little bit on the attack.
So and is that's part of our bias, right? We're automatically thinking that she means this, or they are inferring that. And
Yeah.
so
She felt defensive as a female candidate, thinking that she was being discriminated against, and really her old self might have gone on the attack, but her evolved self took that 6 seconds to pause and just said, can you clarify that? And got a completely different outcome.
fantastic. So I also want to bring up this question from Gabe. It says, in the workplace, unchecked unconscious bias can result in a narrow pool of candidates being hired and promoted, as well as limited creativity, diversity, and inclusivity in the workplace. Unconscious bias can also affect collaboration between employees and prevent innovation and productivity. Completely. So anything you want to add to that, Dorothy, or anything that you want to build on?
Well, I've just been with a client in Luxembourg for the past 2 days, and we spent a day and a half going through this, and we've only got like a few minutes. But it's just something that all our systems, our workplace systems, are just riddled with bias from the get-go. So we really need to dig deep and to bring about some massive changes. But I mean, for that to happen, we need 3 elements. We need leadership commitment, and that means money, budgets. And there is research that came out from Smart Recruiters actually that says that budgets haven't changed in about 10 years. So we need systemic change. We need to look at all our hiring processes and identify which biases are involved in which stages and every stage. And then we need to change individual behavior.
Inclusivity starts with I, right? Inclusion starts with I.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, so I think that we're back to this spark of a question about the at least the top 5 or the most immediate 5 ways to quickly understand our unconscious biases.
Well, I would suggest doing the Harvard implicit bias test, and there's a really nice little exercise that you can do when you have time, is make a list of your 10 closest professional or even personal contacts, which are not your family or romantic partner, and then analyze their background. So you can make a list. It's called the circle of trust, I think. And you put, what their sexual orientation, their race, their nationality, their first language, their age, all of these characteristics, and you can see if there's a pattern. And I've done hundreds of these workshops, and most people generally have a very narrow network. So one of the first things you can do is you can expand your horizons. You can start asking questions. You can start reading new things, meeting new people, doing different things, volunteering with different organizations, but just anything to get out of your own little way of doing things.
Right. And so I did put this link up here for the implicit, the take the test. So please, if you want to see what yours are, not if you have them, and understand them better so that you can actually start to do something with this is a great starting point. Correct?
Yeah, and I think also then once you've done that, when you find yourself in a situation, understand that situations are never binary. They're like a diamond. They're multifaceted, and just start understanding maybe that someone can come to a situation from a different place, and treating people with empathy and being mindful. So I think a combination of all of these things, it just helps everybody get to be more tolerant and more accepting. And I think the most important thing is to accept difference and not to be threatened by it. And if you feel threatened by it, try and dig deep and find out what that might be, because it's usually maybe involved in a previous experience or something that happened in your childhood or your education, but it's just a way of understanding.
Perfect. Perfect. Are there any other pieces to these 5? So take this test as a starting point.
Yeah.
Build in the discovery phase,
Yeah.
moving from defense to discovery. What else am I missing here?
Ask questions, become more mindful, respond with empathy, understand that situations are never binary, they're always multifaceted, and to just be open, have a growth mindset and open to difference, to understand that there are different ways of doing and understanding the world.
So these are awesome kind of guardrails to prevent us from like making assumptions and going down kind of like perhaps a craggy or very ignited opportunity and diffusing it on a lot of levels. I'm curious because this is also an area that you specialize in, which is job seekers, how we take that information and apply it in very heated situations or very tense situations like the interview stage and then beyond.
Well, I think the first thing that I would do as a job seeker is do your research on a company, and normally you can check on Glassdoor or PayScale. You can check on the website if they have diversity, inclusion, gender balance policy. If they have very open commitment to bullying and harassment policies. So you're basically looking for organizations that are committed to diversity and inclusion. But I think the most important thing, and we did that with your group last week or the week before, is that when you're in a situation and you feel defensive, okay, so you take the break, you breathe, and you ask what I call the CIA approach. So it's context, intention, and either action or agreement. So you're establishing the context. Help me. Can you clarify what why you said that, or the background to your question, or whatever? Then you ask them, well, help me understand what's going on, and then okay, then you agree that you're both on the same page. Now, I know that it's quite difficult, particularly if you get a hostile interviewer or someone who asks an inappropriate or legal question. But I think quite often that raises the question of whether you really want to be with that company. And I think if someone really went into the sensitive areas, the no-go areas around gender, race, disability, sexual orientation, I think you just want to note it and just let it go. And the only other thing you can do if you feel that you want to is to leave a comment or escalate it within the organization, leave a comment on their on Glassdoor. But I think just try and diffuse it and establish context in the interview.
So I love this acronym, the CIA approach: context, intention, action. I also really love this tip, which is, I think you referred to it as this is like kind of like the no fail, like lead into help me understand, or would you please explain, so that you're not only giving yourself a pause, but you're also putting it in some kind of like, again, neutral territory, so you're not like going in for the defense. I think that this is where your 6 seconds should be spent, right? And so I also want to I want to get back. I see that we have Shelley Piedmont in the house, and she said, yes, right. I love this topic. I used to have trainers come to my organization to help people understand their own biases. I thought understanding this and having some tools to address this would make us a better organization. For sure, for sure. I mean, I am curious because there is so much that's happening, of course, with the Great Resignation and people, making a mass exodus, where this piece of unconscious or conscious bias is swaying in terms of where it is. That is the piece around not being seen and heard part of what people are actually leaving for? Is that a bias in and of itself?
Yeah, it's all of those things. I mean, it's they're not feeling valued, they're not feeling recognized. They may not fit into the culture, which is conformity bias, or that there are so many, that there will be some reason why they don't feel included or that they belong in that company. And so what happens now, what we're also seeing, and this is a study that came from, I think it was Accenture, where they have all of these candidates who are applying but not getting offers or meetings or interviews or whatever. And this is also bias on the other side. And working with clients, what we're seeing is that, we need like 5 degrees and 10 years experience at entry level and all of these things. They've really, really got to start relaxing some of these demanding qualifications and try and find some sort of middle ground. And that's why you've heard me say this before, and I've just done my LinkedIn newsletter is on this, that they're looking for teachability. So one of the things for candidates is, demonstrate a commitment to continuous learning, and organizations, please look for it. Because you might have 4 or 5 of the key competence but miss one and you get cut. I mean, that's crazy. So what I want to see is people relaxing, thinking, how can we train?
Right. And so I don't know, within the scope of at least 150 different biases, would you say pedigree bias is also a thing, which is like your degree, your past companies, and it kind of like having that status.
Yeah,
I find that.
it definitely can be. I mean, that gets into also the confirmation bias of, people like us, people who think like us, people who behave like this, us, people who have the same background. And basically what you're getting is groupthink. So
Mm,
you're not having any diversity of thought. So, and that's one of the reasons why the companies are stagnating. They're losing people. They're not being innovative. And as somebody said earlier, collaborative, all of these things. So it's not just about a human issue and doing the right things. It's also a business issue.
hmm
Business that are gender balanced, diverse, and inclusive are more successful.
hmm So I put these two ends of the coins. You candidate demonstrate teachability, right? Agility. If you're Marty Constant, who is a big advocate for agility, and employers relax on the mandates, right? Like the criteria keep growing, and and also at many phases at inappropriate levels. You're in an entry level role and you're supposed to have all this experience, and those
And
two
it's
things don't
nuts.
even talk to each other.
It's
And
nuts.
so yeah, so really stop looking at just the pieces on the resume and start considering the actual person and what they can add to the organization, right?
Well, well, I'll jump in there because it's about looking for competences and being realistic about what is required. And I think one of the things is that the World Economic Forum says for the skills required for 2025, only two of them are hard skills. So I think it's about developing soft skills, and I think particularly for younger candidates who are quite device focused, that it's really important that to develop soft skills, because that's what employers are going to be looking for.
Yeah, so that's it. And I'm curious, I know this is a little bit off topic, but how do people actually place a value on soft skills? Because so many of the hard skills, driving revenues, hitting KPIs, and all of that, are often superseding their entire, they're so weighted in the interview process and in the performance. How do some of those softer skills kind of, get the credibility that they deserve? Uh,
Well, that's interesting. It's because actually these results, that the things that you mentioned are the results of strong soft skills. So you're not going to have a successful P&L if you're bad at building relationships,
mm,
and negotiating and problem solving and analyzing data, all of these things. It doesn't happen on its own. So you are going to meet your KPIs and hit your revenue targets because you've got a good toolbox of soft skills. And I think obviously where that becomes harder is if you have a job that might be heavily driven by soft skill. I'm thinking engineering, tech, that sort of thing. But for other things, it's about collaboration, working with teams, all of these things to get where you're going to be, and their soft skills.
okay, so that I like this. I'm going to paraphrase this if that's okay. I'm going to say
Yeah, dude.
soft skills are the secret to driving hard hitting results,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is very, maybe even counterintuitive on some level to what a lot of employers think.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you brought that up as a way for candidates, at least, to make not an argument, but to build some kind of story around this. Because of this, I've been able to achieve X, Y, or Z.
And there's a Belgian, well, she's actually Belgian, but she's based in New York, a psychologist called Esther Perel. And I'm sure you've read her. And and she says that people are fired for skills, but hired for skill, but quite often fired for soft skills.
Mm.
Or the lack of soft skills. So, quite often we might make a mistake judging people purely on their hard skills and then find they've got no soft skills and it doesn't work. So basically, it's all about relationships
Mm.
at the end of the day.
Brilliant. I love this. Hey, Varsha. She is such an amazing content contributor, and she is also a magic and spinner of words. So thank you for joining in. She said, I heard that likability is one of the biases. So how should an interviewee deal with it? I think this is a great question.
Yeah, I mean, it is, because women, that's usually applied to women. And there are massive biases for women around interview performance, because first of all, that they have to demonstrate their history, whereas and they're judged in male coded environments differently and more harshly to men. So I think that it's important to be professional and be competent, and to ask questions around the type of organization. And I think without actually being in an interview or knowing the organization, that's why it's hard, is because each organization will define things differently. And women, it's what we call the Goldilocks dilemma. It's too little, too much, not enough. Do you smile too much? Is it too much makeup, not enough makeup? So it's about trying to read the room. And this is where women, I'm gonna stereotype now. I shouldn't, but I will. Tend to be a little bit more intuitive, that they can read the room, and you can see and you can get a feeling for how you think that is going to be received. And I think, once again, ask some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything I can add? What would you like me to? Is there anything I can cover?
Excellent. Yes, I think
Does
that
that
there's.
answer your question?
I think that this was. Thank you, Vasha. I think that this was a fantastic question, because I think that there is a lot of. Well, we talk about know, like, and trust. I mean, it's in our everyday language. We know that there is a truism around people like to work with people that they know, like, and trust. So being likable in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but I think that what Varsha is also raising is that, where does it become a little bit too much
The
on
bias. Well, I think
on the
that's why you've
people
got to ask the
pleasing side?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why you've got to ask the questions, because they might like you because you went to the same school or the same university, or your kids are in the same nursery, or you worked in the same company. So that's why you have to maybe research the people, find out what's going on, and then ask some questions, and just establish what they're looking for in terms of competence, and make sure that you check all your boxes, knowing that women are going to judge more harshly than men, and that's
Right.
we know that.
So I am going to do a quick recap, because we actually covered a lot of ground in this blast. And the first thing that we talked about is everyone has these biases, because if you have a brain, you got a bias. And so to stop putting it into some kind of like evil category, ooh, I'm evil or you're evil, and really to start also looking at what is it that you're doing. Inclusion starts with I, and also really implement this as part of that. Start exploring, getting curious, go from defensive to discovery. A really interesting way to kind of benchmark some of your current biases, because, like I said, they exist, is to take this implicit test and really understand that. From a candidate's perspective, I really appreciate this piece too, about using this acronym CIA context as you are going through the process, as you're exploring opportunity even early on if you are doing your research, if you're putting it in context, you may call somebody and say, hey, I'm interviewing at XYZ organization. Help me understand, is DEI like, is that lip service, or like, what are they really doing about it, so that you have a benchmark to understand where it is, actually being implemented. Candidates, right? You're a key area for you to really focus in is not necessarily exclusively on the hard skills and the things that you can check off in terms of your qualifications for that job, but really a level of teachability. And employers, like, stop it. Right?
Yeah, stop it. Yeah, that's enough. That's fine.
Stop it. Stop setting these like impossible to achieve requirements in bars, especially that don't align with that particular level.
Exactly.
Because that's only really kind of killing yourself, right? It's really like not helping your case.
Absolutely.
And so I am going to wrap up with these. It looks like that there is a lot of thanks to you, Dorothy, and a lot of appreciation for everything that you're doing. And I am as Kevin said in the comments, he's biased. I'm biased too, because I'm like a huge Dorothy like fangirl. And a lot of that is because there is a level of really not only knowing the research, but being brave enough to bring it to the fore. And I value that. I appreciate that. And I know that your content is just absolutely stellar in this area. Please, everyone, follow Dorothy, Dorothy Dalton on LinkedIn. She is a wonderful, wonderful content contributor, and also her newsletter that I get is locked and loaded. Any other parting words or anything else that you want to? I'm going to just put this up as a sign off.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for an amazing summary. I don't know how you manage to multitask. I'm one of these women that can't multitask at all. And just last words, basically, see something, say something, do something. So if you encounter a bias, raise it. It doesn't have to be a fight or a conflict situation. Help me understand what made you say that. And the more people that build a speak up culture or call out culture, the easier it will be to make changes.
Oh my God, I have to write that. See something, say something, do something, right? Like I think this is where things really get kind of, I don't know, you tell me, off the rails, right? It's the do something. Maybe it's even the say something.
Well, between 66 and 75% of inappropriate behavior, and that includes bias-related behavior, is unreported. So there are a lot of people being subjected to what we call microaggressions every day. So quite often we're oblivious to it. We are so used to seeing these things. They're embedded in our cultures. So see something, say something. If it's yourself, check yourself. And the other thing is ask for feedback. Constantly be asking questions.
Fantastic. So we're going to say happy rest of your day. Enjoy your walk, Dorothy. Big thank you. Huge appreciation. Thank you, everybody who joined today. Anybody who wants to find out more about this topic and so many others, please, like I said, follow Dorothy and get her newsletter. All of that information is on her LinkedIn profile. And thank you, everybody. Any questions, comments, please, by all means, reach out to me. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and see you later.
Thanks, Lauren. Bye-bye.